Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's application seminar for HNES Round 10. My name's Amy Taylor. I'm a marketing executive at GemServe, which is the delivery partner for HNES. So first of all, I'm just going to cover some quick housekeeping rules. So please mute your microphones to limit disruption. If you're not speaking, please turn off webcams to improve video quality. We also have a Q&A function if you'd like to ask any questions during the webinar, which you can find in the top right-hand corner. We'll try to answer any questions throughout the session, and we also have a dedicated Q&A section at the end. This webinar is being recorded, and we will distribute the slides afterwards for anyone who'd like to revisit the slides or for anyone who wasn't able to join today. So I'll just quickly run through the agenda before I hand over to Louise. First of all, Louise will be sharing an introduction to HNES, including some important updates to the guidance for round 10. She will also be sharing some examples of HNES funded projects and cover the optimization studies. Katie Ansari is going to be giving an overview of the application process, and then Louise will chat through submitting an application, and Louise is going to discuss some of the support available for applicants, and then we will have a Q&A section where the team will be on hand to answer any questions that you may have. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Louise, who's going to share an introduction to HNES.
Thank you very much, Amy. Hi, everyone. So I'm Louise Singleton. I'm the HNES Programme Manager here at GemServe. So next slide, please. So just to give you a bit of context of where the heat network efficiency scheme sits in the kind of wider government heat network transformation programme. So the programme was set up in 2013 with the Heat Networks Delivery Unit, which was designed to support predominantly local authorities with understanding how to build out and develop heat networks. In 2018, the Heat Network Investment Project was launched, and that was to fund the new building of new heat networks, and that was then replaced with the Green Heat Network Fund in 2023. But it was recognised that there was also a number of heat networks already existing in the market. So there's about 14,000, I believe, is the kind of official figure. And not all of those are operating as optimally as we would like. And so the government set up the Heat Network Efficiency Scheme. We ran a demonstrator back in 2021-22, and then the main scheme, which we're in now, launched in 2023. And the scheme's designed to fund improvement measures to existing district and communal heat networks within England and Wales. We also then have a number of other elements within the transformation programme looking at market framework, so market regulations that have come into place, the Heat Networks Technical Assurance Scheme, which is due to launch next year, and the heat network zoning regulations as well. So there's a number of different regulations that are coming into place to support the heat networks industry as well. We go to the next slide. So there are three aims of HNES. The first is to reduce carbon emissions by making heat networks more efficient. The second is to reduce customer detriment to improve consumer confidence. So the main theory behind this is that as part of the Climate Change Committee's future plans for decarbonisation within the UK, they say that heat networks need to increase from 3% to 20% by 2050. And we want to make sure that those that already are on a heat network are getting an optimal experience and are real advocates for heat networks. So as I said, we're aware that some heat networks aren't performing as well as they should. So by improving their performance, it means that consumers get a better experience of being on a heat network. And finally, the third objective is to help prepare the heat network market for sector regulation and technical standards. So I've mentioned before about the Heat Network Technical Assurance Scheme, or HNES. This will set minimum performance standards for new and existing heat networks, and HNES is there to support existing heat networks now to start making efficiencies and improvements with a view to then being able to comply with the regulations as they come forward. So next slide then. So in terms of funding that we have available, we have two types of funding. We have revenue grants and capital grants. So revenue grants are designed for heat networks that know they're not operating effectively, but maybe aren't aware of the reasons why or the measures that would need to be installed to improve the network. So the idea is that you would appoint an external third party to come in and review the network and make recommendations as to what could be improved. We can fund between £15,000 and £24,000 for these studies, and that would be including VAT. That's kind of our budget range, really, our recommended budget range, and that can be fully funded within that range. For round 10, applicants will be able to request funding in the financial year 26-27, so starting in April next year and running till March 2027, subject to budget availability. On the capital side, so these grants are to implement the actual measures that will make the improvements to the network. So this may come about as a result of having undertaken an optimization study through HNES, but you don't necessarily have to have done an HNES funded optimization study in order to apply for a capital grant. You can come in straight at the capital level if you have already undertaken some kind of optimization or investigation study prior to applying. The funding is up to but not including 50% of all of the eligible costs, project costs. So essentially the applicant needs to pay more than the government in paying for the measures. And the funding for that is up to £75 million out till FY 27-28. So again, within round 10, applicants will be able to apply for funding for capital projects in next financial year and the financial year after that, so from April 26 through to March 2028. If you are applying for funding across 2 different financial years, you must be able to spend the funding that you've requested in the financial year that you have requested it in. So if you're requesting funding in 26-27, you can't then claim that money in 27-28. It must all be claimed by the end of March 2027. So it's important to think about your project plan, when you expect certain amounts to be or certain costs to be spent, and when you then want to claim or request for the funding to be put into different financial years. On the match funding side, so particularly for capital grants, that funding can be spent anytime within the financial years. It doesn't have to be a sort of 50-50 split, for example, with your grant funding. You could front load your grant funding and then use your match funding in a later year, or vice versa, or a mix of the two. So they don't have to align across matched and funded amounts. So next slide then. So we have a guidance for applicants document, which goes into a lot more detail about what's eligible and what isn't eligible. But here's just some, it's probably easier to say what is ineligible rather than what's eligible. So there are links in these slides, and they'll be shared. Oh, they've just been shared in the chat as well. So the guidance. So we really would recommend everyone have a read of that before you apply. In terms of ineligible costs for capital grants, so I should say we cover works all the way through from the energy centre through to the tertiary network and some elements of metering. But in terms of things that aren't eligible, any capital costs that you've already incurred ahead of a HNES award having been made. So that means when you receive your award letter, after the assessment process has been completed, that's the point at which we say your funding award has been made. Anything you spend now after that date would be eligible. Anything before that wouldn't be. Anything that's not related to the heat network infrastructure, so anything to do with improvements to building fabric, for example. Any costs related to engagement activities, so stakeholder management, internal project management, they're not really capital costs in that sense. Looking more specifically at the different sections of the network, so within the energy centre, we're not able to fund replacement of primary heat generation source. So regardless of whether that's a sort of like for like gas boiler, for example, or if you were looking to replace a gas boiler with a air source heat pump, that wouldn't be eligible under HNES. And also if you are needing to put in any temporary boilers while you are making improvements within the energy centre, we wouldn't be able to cover any of the fuel costs related to that that energy supply. In the tertiary systems, so anything to do with buying or replacing pipework or heat emitters within the buildings or the dwellings is not eligible. So typically we fund kind of up to the HRU and not really very much beyond that sits within the sort of residential dwellings. And on the metering side, anything that is a legal requirement under the heat network metering and billing regulations. So if you have a legal requirement to install meters, we are not able to fund those meters. That's something you have to do yourself as a legal requirement. If you are exempt from the metering and billing regs, or if you're going over and above the requirement, or you're looking to install more sophisticated metering equipment, then that may be eligible. But anything you have a legal requirement to do is not eligible, I'm afraid. So next slide then. On the revenue side, so again, within our guidance for applicants documents, we have a section at the end called Annex A, and that sets out what we would expect to see from an optimization study. So that's essentially what we will cover. In terms of ineligible costs, so any work already commissioned or incurred ahead of the funding announcement, again, similar to the capital position. Any internal staffing costs, project management costs of your consultant, that wouldn't be covered. And anything to do with construction, operation and maintenance of a heat network, that's also not within the revenue grant envelope. So in terms of who can apply, as I said, HNES is focused on existing district or communal heating systems. The heat network needs to be within England or Wales. And the entity, we cover a really wide range of organisations, so public sector, private sector, third sector organisations are all eligible. But in terms of who the applicant needs to be, the applicant organisation, it needs to be a legal entity and have the authority to sign off investment decisions for the heat network. So it could be the heat network owner, it could be the heat network operator, it could be a resident management company, provided they have the authority to sign off on investment decisions. So particularly for management companies that operate on behalf of leaseholders, for example, it will depend on the agreement that you have and the I guess the position that you have within that network as to whether or not you can apply on behalf of the leaseholders or whether it needs to be the leaseholder company itself. Essentially, whoever has the ability to sign off on investment decisions, that's who needs to be the applicant. It's also worth noting that the applicant name must match the legal company name listed on Companies House. And also, we ask you to provide bank details for where the grant will be paid into if you're successful. And the bank account name must match the applicant name. So it's really important that you really do consider who is the best organisation to be the applicant, because these things need to align. In terms of funding rounds then, so obviously this is the webinar relating to round 10, but we have also got 3 other funding rounds that have been announced. So we opened the funding round 10 on the 5th of August, and the closing date is the 19th of September. We'll talk through in a bit about the way in which you apply, but for those that have been involved in HNES before, we have moved to an online application form. We're not using the Excel spreadsheets that we used previously. We now therefore ask that if you are wanting to apply, you obviously need to request access to the portal. And the last day to request access will be the 5th of September, so 2 weeks before the closing date, just to make sure that people have enough time to actually complete the application and submit a good quality application, basically. For round 11, we're looking to open the round on the 1st of December, and the closing date will be the 6th of February. And then obviously 2 weeks before that, 23rd of January, is the last day to request an application form. And then for rounds 12 and 13, slightly vaguer in terms of the actual actual dates, but in terms to give you an idea of roughly when they'll fall, we're looking at closing dates in May and October next year for those 2 funding rounds. Obviously everything's subject to budget availability, but we do expect that those rounds will run. So and again, we've got a link to the guidance for applicant document there as well. So again, for those of you that have been involved in HNES before, you'll have noticed that there have been a number of updates to the guidance document. So we issued the updated version on the 5th of August when we opened round 10. If you go to the end of the document on pages 71, 72, you can see the full list of all the changes that were made from the previous version. But I just wanted to highlight some of the changes now. So with regards to the application process, as I mentioned, we're now using an online portal rather than the SharePoint spaces that we used before. So that's reflected in the guidance. There's an update around the relationship manager service to say that we may reserve the right to request particularly capital projects engage with our relationship manager service ahead of submitting an application. And a few more updates on the AP1A form. So the AP1A form is where we request you provide your bank details. So again, it's just what I was saying before around making sure that your company name aligns with the bank account details. So it's things around that. In terms of the application questions, so again, we'll touch on this a bit later, but there are a few additional questions that have been added into the forms. So there are a few more questions around supply chain. So looking at if you have meters installed or HRUs installed, what make and model are they? There's also there's reference to the energy ombudsman. So from April this year, where the heat network regulations have come in, heat network residents or people that are on heat networks can now access the energy ombudsman. So there's reference to that in the application question as to whether the heat network is registered with the ombudsman. We've also got additional questions around if you have previously received funding through HNES, you will have provided information about how you would expect to engage with your customers on your network. We would like to see evidence of that engagement. So if you issued out a newsletter, if you put up posters, if you held a online forum or things like that, so evidence of the engagement activities that you actually undertook, so we can basically check that what you said in your previous application has happened. In terms of definitions and thresholds, so we've just updated our definitions to make them a bit clearer. We've also included a capital funding maximum grant ask of 10 million. In terms of the dates and deadlines, so again, I've obviously talked through the funding round dates have been updated out to round 13. We've extended the assessment timescales slightly by a couple of weeks just to reflect the sort of actualities of how it's been from previous funding rounds, and also in terms of grant claims. If you are successful, as I said, you have to claim your funding within the financial year that it has been allocated. We need time to process those grant claims towards the end of the financial year. So we're asking that any funding requests or any evidence for grant awarded in the financial year is provided to us by February, before the financial year ends in March, just to give us enough time to get those processed and over to DESNZ's finance team to make the payment in time. From legislation and other industry initiatives, so as I've mentioned, the heat networks regulations came into force in April, so that's reflected in there. There's also reference to the HNES. PSDS is the Public Service Decarbonisation Scheme, and Public Sector Decarbonisation Scheme, and that has is no longer in existence, so that's been removed. And there's also reference to the Heat Network Exchange, which is an online forum where you can post if you're looking for work or contractors to undertake work, you can sort of almost advertise your requirements there. And finally, just around funding exclusion. So I mentioned we've updated these just to include things like fuel costs and not eligible for HNES funding. So like I say, have a look over the guidance. The full list is at the back of the guidance, and yeah, it really is worth reading through ahead of applying, so that you're clear of what the scheme will and won't fund, and the requirements under the scheme as well. So in terms of funded projects that we've funded previously, so we have now announced all of the projects that were awarded funding from rounds 1 to 8. So within those 8 rounds, we've awarded over £60 million of capital and revenue funding to over 330 projects. In terms of the sort of sectors that have been funded, like I say, we do fund a wide range of sectors, so housing associations, local authorities, health, so yeah, NHS Trust, for example, education sector, so universities, colleges, charities, private sector. So a real wide range of sectors have been funded. And in terms of the type of measures that we've installed under, we've funded for, particularly for capital works, we're looking at things like upgrading or replacement of pipework, improving insulation, so either replacing or installing if it wasn't there in the first place, updating controls, replacing or recommissioning HRUs, measures around improving water quality, and also around reducing leaks. So again, a wide range of different elements that we can fund, and the map on the right just shows a kind of overview of the different areas that networks have received funding. So again, a good spread across both England and Wales, but we're always obviously looking for more projects to come forward. If you go to the next slide, so we issued out our round 8 press release back in June, I think it was. Over £7 million was awarded to those projects. So there was 49 heat networks received that funding. We've got a couple of pictures here, just sort of showing some of the networks that were funded. So there's one in Cardiff, there's one in Camden, and thank you, Sasha. She's just put a link to the press release in the chat. So again, if you want to see a bit more detail about the types of projects that were funded and the types of measures, particularly on the capital side, we have press releases for all of the funding rounds 1 to 8, so you can see the types of measures and the types of amounts that people have been awarded. So have a look over those. I'm now going to hand over to Katie. She's going to talk you through what we expect to see from an optimisation study.
Hello everyone. Yeah, my name's Katie and I'm one of the HNES relationship managers. So yeah, I'm just going to have a run through of what's expected from the optimisation studies, which is to do with the revenue funding. So there are three parts really for the final optimization report. The first one being work package 1. The aim of work package 1 basically is to investigate and assess the network's current operational performance, and to realize any conditions of the network. So it's good to develop a baseline against which optimization measures can be developed and the impact they will then have if carried out, which is quantified in work package 2. It will also say once you have a better understanding of the causes of the suboptimal performance, with these impacts, you can then carry out a list of measures, which is more like in work package 2. But for work package 1, I do want to just run through the steps. So first bit is the data capture and analysis from the site visits. So that needs to include in the report any pictures and diagrams, any descriptions of the heat network. Also gather the baseline data of the network performance and its KPIs. So it must cover the assessment of the whole network. So things like from the plant room or energy center to the primary and secondary and tertiary networks, as well as the customer interfaces, if that's relevant. The KPIs will form the basis as well for considering the benefits and cost effectiveness of the proposed optimization recommendations in work package 2. So it's a full analysis of the network performance. And on to the next slide. And thank you. So for work package 2, it's more to identify and develop the possible potential optimization measures and to quantify the costs and the impacts that the measures would have on the network performance. So with this, a consultant will have listed out any issues that they've found during the site visit and incorporate any measures, list out those measures to maybe improve the efficiency of the network. They will also write down how much they cost and how much energy is saved, or just so you can see what you're gaining from if you install these measures. So in this as well, the heat network operator will receive a report, and this should include a robust analysis of the recommendations offered, as well as showing a course of action as to how to improve the operational performance and the customer outcomes. For example, then in the steps, we need a development of the optimization measures and packages of measures. So again, having a list of the measures and how much they cost and combination of different packages to get like the most optimal version of your heat network. Again, running down the cost and cost effectiveness of the assessment and how and any improvements, like what it will improve on the heat network. Also needs to include the reporting and recommendations, and this will be required as a table within the report with all the baseline data gathered and comparison of the baseline, the KPIs that it could need to reach. Sorry about that. I want to also say then that we do also need a techno-economic analysis. This needs to be in an unlocked Excel spreadsheet to be provided by the consultants who are carrying out the optimization study. It needs to be unlocked because it does need to be edited in case things need to change and any of the packages or measures may need to be removed or increased and reduced and things like that. It does also need to show like the forecasting of said works and how it will affect the heat network. So on to the next slide, please. So overall, the final deliverables for the optimization report. So you need a project report, which I said should include baseline data and a summary of the site visit. So again, pictures of the site, diagrams of the heat network, things like that. The techno-economic analysis spreadsheet, again, which needs to be unlocked and have a breakdown of the costs. So have the heat network operator has a better understanding of what these improvements will do. And also need a final submission of the M&R, so the monitoring reporting worksheet. This is known as the optimization study outputs annex, and it basically has a run through of how, well, you do like a monthly monitoring report, M&R report, but this one is the final one after the project has been completed. We do also have like guidance on how to do that, so that will be provided if you are successful. We do recommend once you have completed your revenue study, then it's good to apply for the capital funding to then implement all these measures that have been provided. And next slide, please. I'm going to talk a bit about the application process as well. So next slide, please. Within, as Louise mentioned before, Round 10 is a new application form, so it's all online instead of the Excel spreadsheet. But the sections, if you have applied previously, are the same, kind of similar. So just to run through on the applicant info side, we do need the applicant organisation information, so their address, location, if they have a parent company, and any contacts relating to that application, so primary and additional contacts. We would also request that the name of the applicant matches the legal entity name exactly. So if it is a registered company, please write it down as it's listed on Companies House. Please also ensure that if you do have a VAT number, you do input it. It's not like a section to decide whether you input it or not, because we do need to run our checks as well. So on section B, we need a description of the network, so the actual network that you're applying for, its address and things like that. It's more about the project details, this section. So we do need the network characteristics, proportion of dwellings that fall under the HNES definition, and any reference to customers in need. We also need the supply chain information, for example, the O&M contractor, any metering and billing providers, and a new question that is on the Round 10 application form is any makes and models of heat meters and HIUs where relevant. They also, within this bit, there's the regulatory part, so we need to know if you've registered under the Heat Trust or the Heat Network metering and billing regulations. And again, as Louise mentioned before about the Energy Ombudsman, just make sure they're all like in place when you apply. And then on to the section C for project narrative. Is basically a chance for you to tell us about your project. Try and be as detailed as you can and cover all the information that is asked within this section. So we do want an overview of the project and the funding request, so how you've come to that number, what it's going to achieve, any network data availability you have, and quality and metering data. We also need a good rationale for funding the application. So how much it relates to objects 1 and 2. So that's reducing carbon emissions to make networks more efficient and reducing customer detriment. We also have, again, a new section in this bit. So please, obviously, explain for any applicants who have previously had HNES funding, evidence like the communication methods they used last time on previous projects and how they're going to improve the portfolio this time. And again, suboptimal outcomes experience, so please list those and put it into more detail. And next slide, please. So on the capital side, it's called baseline and target, because we need both all the baseline data that you have relating to the heat network, but any targets that you wish to achieve and you think that the measures will achieve by having them installed. But on the revenue side, it's just baseline information. We do understand that you might not have this information for revenue applications, well, not all of it, but do try and input as much as you can, so it gives us a better understanding of where the heat network's at, like the situation it's in at the moment. I would say on the capital side as well, if it's a measure that you want to improve as part of the application, please make sure that you have both the baseline information, the original KPI for that, and the target that you want in. If you don't have meters and things like that, you can put in a calculation of what you think it will be achieving, and the information, like the data that you have so far. The targets can be the same as baseline as well. So just, but obviously we are looking for improvements, so keep that in mind. Even if it is the same as well, please input that into the target section. Within obviously the baseline and target bit, we are looking for any heat demands and any losses, any outages and service interruptions, and any economic indicators. Also, the types of fuel that you use and things like that. In section E is the funding and procurement section. So this is to display like the total application budget and the funding request. This does need to be broken down in the capital side for any measures. So there's sections that is related to primary, secondary and tertiary, or the energy or plant center, energy center or plant room, sorry. And the measures need to be relevant to those parts if that's what you're wanting the money for. So please do put some good descriptions for the measures you're wishing to carry out. On the revenue side, obviously the funding will be for an optimization study, but if you can't claim, if your VAT is irrecoverable, please justify why and put that in the table as well. We do also need information on the procurement, so any procurement milestones and a description of starting dates, deadlines, and how long it's going to take and over what years. Also, if you are including contingency, please put this in the other section of tab E, just to ensure it's clearly identified rather than having intertwined with each of the measures. And for section F, it's the confirmations. So these are to do with all your supporting evidence. Is it there? Have you uploaded all the relevant details, such as like quotes, confirmation letters, your AP1A form? But again, if you, as Louise mentioned earlier, if you go onto the guidance for applicants, it does have a list of supporting evidence that you need to upload depending on your application. There is also the declarations as well, so that needs to be all ticked. And on to the next slide, please. So in supporting evidence, it goes into a bit more detail here. The main parts we wanted to pull out is having a detailed project plan. I know it does need to be completed in the application form, but if you have a more detailed project plan, that will only support your application as well. Obviously, quotes, this applies to both capital and revenue, and any confirmations. So if you need a letter of authority or confirming relationships or anything like that, please upload that in the supporting documentation. We also need in the capital side then evidence of targeted benefits, so how you've come about the numbers you have. And the new section, the new part here that we need for evidence is evidence of the communication methods used on previous HNES funded projects. So obviously that's only for projects that it relates to, but if you have had previous funding, please upload that. On the revenue side then, we do need evidence of the application costs. So have you come about the number that you have? So please upload quotes as well. And any signed letters of confirmation to support the application. If you need match funding, if it goes over the allocated budget for revenue. But again, back to capital, sorry. We would need confirmation in writing that you are able to match fund in the said years that you're applying for capital funding. So please keep that in mind. We still need the AP1A for revenue as well, and again, evidence of communication methods used on previous projects. On to the next slide, please. So if you are applying for multiple projects under HNES, particularly in revenue grants, if you're submitting multiple applications in one round, we would need good justification as to why you don't believe the knowledge that you've gained from one optimization study or that you will gain from one optimization study can apply you can apply to other heat networks. So any description as to what the differences are, any customer detriment differences or indicators, why the design or operation can't be related to for the one that you're actually applying for, to justify basically why you need multiple studies. And again, if you are submitting further applications from previously funded awards, you would need to explain how you can't apply any lessons learned from the previous studies and why it can't be applied to the new heat networks that you're applying for. On the capital side then, we are wanting an explanation or consideration should be given as to whether the capital works are similar in nature and whether the lessons learned could be made by running the projects sequentially rather than parallel. Might be worthwhile to take note of that, to also consider like your budgets and things. As for submitting further applications, it is good to know if you've had previous funding, if you can apply any lessons learned from the previous funding, whether that you need to extend your timelines, your dates, if you were struggling to complete it by the original timeline, if you had any issues crop up, or if you need to communicate better with any of the residents or surrounding buildings. Next slide, please. I'll pass it back over to Louise.
Thanks, Katie.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Amy.
Sorry. I was just going to say we've had one question in the chat. Hunter said, if we can't gather the information around HIUs/heat meters, how will this affect the application? Many clients find it hard to gather this information.
I'm going to put maybe Amy and Sasha on the spot here in terms of Hunter. Are you able to come off mute? And I'm not quite sure I understand the question. Basically, are you asking, when you say gather the information around HIUs heat meters, is this in relation to the new questions that we've added in about the types and the makes and models and that kind of thing? Or are you asking if people don't have heat meters on the network, are they able, how are they able to gather the baseline information? I wasn't quite sure what the question was relating to. So either feel free to, are you off mute?
It was more just around, so when we're doing this applications on behalf of our clients and we'll submit an RFI to them, a lot of the times they'll have trouble actually getting the information like the data badge from the HIU. So it might not be, the data might not actually be what's on the scheme. So if they can't get that information, I was just wondering if it's going to have a negative effect on the application.
So from a revenue perspective, like I say, we appreciate that half the time why people don't know how well what the issues are on their network or what measures could be improved is because they don't have data and they don't have access to that information. So although it does make up part of the assessment process, if you don't have accurate metering information, that wouldn't preclude you from getting funding.
Okay.
From a capital perspective, again, obviously we appreciate that people haven't always necessarily got the meters in place. You are able to say within the application form whether or not you've used accurate information or it's estimated. Obviously, we would prefer to have accurate information because not only just for your application itself in terms of understanding how your network's performing and your proposed improvement measures, but also if you were to receive funding, how are you going to demonstrate that the improvements that you've made as a result of the funded measures? So we'd always prefer people to have meters and more accurate data. But again, we appreciate that's not always the case. And ultimately, if you don't have accurate data, you may not score as well as other projects, but it doesn't necessarily mean you wouldn't be funded, because obviously that's just one element of the scoring criteria.
Okay, great. That's really helpful.
Right.
I had one other question, if that's all right.
Yeah, go for it.
If a client is not registered with the Energy Ombudsman, will this have a negative impact on the application?
So again, it's very similar to what we've said previously with regards to the heat metering and billing regs. So while it doesn't preclude you from applying or being awarded funding, it's likely that if you have said no to that and you're not registered, we would put that as a condition on your funding to say that before we can pay out the funding, you need to have registered with the Ombudsman in the same way that we've asked previously for people to notify their networks under the metering and billing regulations. It is now a legal requirement through the new regulations, so it's something people should be doing, and we want to make sure that we are sort of encouraging people to do that or requiring people to do that. So it doesn't preclude you at this stage from applying, but yeah, it's something worth either considering once you've submitted your application in between the assessment period, or like I say, it might get added as a condition of funding if you're successful.
Okay, great. That's really helpful. Thank you.
No worries. Okay, so the next section that I wanted to cover is actually how to submit an application. So I'm really hoping that technology isn't going to fail me, and I'm going to share my screen and give you an idea of what the online application form now looks like. So I'll just take control and share my screen. So now hopefully everyone can see the portal. So these are just some test examples, obviously, for demonstration purposes. But what you'll see when you get access to the system and you log in, you'll see the projects that you have requested to submit an application for. So you may have one, you may have multiple, depending on how many applications you are requesting to submit. You can see here whether they are capital or revenue applications, and they will take you to different application forms. And obviously you can see the project name. So again, if you've got multiple projects, you can identify which ones they are, and also the round that you have been assigned to. So obviously for everyone now, it will just be round 10. But if you were then to apply for round 11 or round 12, for example, you'd still be able to see your previous spaces or applications that you'd requested in previous rounds. What you can see here is the status. So once an application has been submitted, it obviously shows that that's been submitted. It's really important to note that once you press submit on the application form, the whole application form, including the ability to upload documents, is locked. So you are not able to make any changes to the application once you've pressed submit. Once the funding round closes, all applications will be locked. So if you haven't submitted your application by 23:59 on the 19th of September, the application will become locked. You won't be able to upload any more additional documents. You won't be able to submit your application, and therefore you won't be assessed within the funding round. So it's really important that you make sure you have pressed submit, and it says application submitted before the funding round deadline. If you scroll over to this side, you can see these little icons here. One is to go to documents. So that's where you will go if you want to upload all your supporting evidence. The last one here is to view your application. So if you've saved your application or when you've submitted it, you can click on there and get a sort of read-only view of what has been submitted or completed to date. But this other icon here is edit application. So when your application is in draft, you're able to go in and edit your application. Once your application has been submitted, that button is no longer there. You can no longer edit. You can view what you submitted, but you can't go in and edit anymore. So if you want to edit your application or submit your application, you click on this icon. And it's probably going to have timed out because I've been on this webinar. So bear with me 1 minute. I will just log out and log back in again. And hopefully that will refresh it. So if I click on this button now, there we go. So it takes you, this is a capital application, so it's taken me to the capital application form. The first page is just some information, so it's worth reading. Certain things like only one person can edit the form at one time. Because if you were to save, if multiple people were in there and they saved over, they'd save over other people's work. So if someone else is in there and editing, the form will be locked and you won't be able to actually access it. But everyone can view the form. So where I had the view application, you can see what the application form looks like and what responses have been received. Multiple people can do that, but only one person can edit at one time. This is just some information about what you need to complete the form. There is a timeout function on the form, so it is important to save progress regularly to make sure you don't lose your work. Again, links to the guidance document and the privacy policy. And again, this point around if you once you've submitted, you can't edit or upload any more documents. So make sure you've done everything before you press submit. For those of you that were familiar with the Excel application forms, you'll see each of the sections here that essentially corresponds to a tab that was on the Excel spreadsheet. So that's how it's been set up. Anything that's obviously got an asterisk, that means it's a mandatory field. You need to complete that before you can submit your application. Certain questions have conditional formatting on them. So if, for example, if I scroll down to the bottom here, you can see that there are just primary and alternative contact details relating to the application. If I go up here and select local authority, then an extra section appears to provide your section 151 officer details. So there are certain questions. Again, do you have a parent company? If you select yes, additional questions appear asking for information about that parent company. If you select no, those questions aren't there. So you can go the whole way through. I think this was on a question earlier on the webinar. You can go all the way through to look at all the questions on each tab without having to complete the first tab or the first section and then move on. The validation kicks in when you press submit. So if there are mandated cells that you haven't completed, when you press submit, the system will tell you need to go back and complete those particular sections, but you are able to move forward and back through the application form to have a look at all the questions before you start completing the whole form. A key section relating to questions that are shown depending on what you put in are these questions here. So is a network district or communal? Depending on what you select here, you will get different questions on the section D, which relates to your baseline and target information. So it's important to make sure you've completed these two questions actually first before you start completing anything on tab D, because at the moment you'll see the questions start at economic indicators, and again it says at the top here sections B will impact section D. So yeah, it starts here at economic indicators. If I go back to B and put in district, you'll then see that economic indicators is here, and there are all these other questions now above that relate to district heating information. Again, if I'd pressed no here, we get even more questions appearing further up relating to your network imported fuel amounts and things like that. So while you can see all the questions, it is worth making sure that you've completed section B first before you start looking at section D to make sure you've got all the relevant questions in place. And then if I go to the next tab, this is where you input all the costing information that you, in terms of the grant ask that you want. We've changed it slightly from the Excel spreadsheet, whereas previously for each line, we'd ask you to say, and how much funding do you want in a particular financial year? Now we're just asking at the bottom down here, a total to say how much total grant are you asking for in 26-27 and how much total are you asking for in 27-28. So just slightly different way of completing this than what there was before. And some of these cells will update automatically. So if you put information or cost information in here, the totals are calculated automatically down the bottom here. Again, there's information around your project milestones, so your date. So you just click on here and a calendar appears. So you put your dates in. And then finally on the last tab, this is the confirmations tab. Again, this is where the again further questions appear if you've answered yes or no, depending on what you say. Finally, at the end, you need to type confirm, and it needs to be with a capital C exactly in this box in order to actually submit. And again, this is just a fail-safe point to make sure that you really do understand that if you press submit, you cannot upload any more information or any more documents or change any of your application forms. So really, hopefully, we won't get people having submitted and not having uploaded everything they need to. And yeah, like I say, you can save your progress as you go through throughout the form. I'll very quickly show you the document upload. So you literally come into this this section, press upload document, and then you can upload the file that you or multiple files that you want to upload into this section. So they'll get listed here. That's pretty much all I was going to show you in terms of how it works. What will happen is if you request, I'll just stop sharing my screen, Amy, and then you can put the slides back up. If you want to submit an application, you need to email us, and we will send you out a link to the application to the portal. So you will get one link as a user. Previously, you would have had a link per SharePoint space. Now you'll just have one link per user. So and then so for the first time when you're logging in, you'll be asked to change your password. If in future rounds, for example, you want to request funding for future projects, you won't receive another link through from the system. You'll just be able, once we've set them up, you'll just be able to log in using your normal login details, and your new projects will appear in that list. Yeah, slightly different in the way that it works, but we also have, as part of our application pack, a how-to guide for how to use the system. So there's screenshots in there, there's steps, and this is, you need to click here and click there and do this and do that. So there is a guide to help you navigate the new system. But as always, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to email us at hnes@gemserve.com, and we can help you with any questions that you have. Just to reiterate then on what I've said, then remember to save as you go along. You don't want to lose your work as you're going through. So yeah, there is a save button on each page. Only one person can edit at one time, so but multiple people can view. So just be aware, if you have got multiple people working on it, that you may need to log out to allow your colleague to go in and make some changes. And please make sure to upload all your supporting documents before you press submit. As like I say, it will be locked once you do press that submit button. I've slightly talked through this already, but just to say, yeah, please email hnes@gemserve.com if you want to express interest or request an application space, and we can then set that up for you. The email that you'll receive is from noreply@talansm.com, so please look out for that. It may go into your junk or your spam filter, so just be aware that that might be the case. You will also receive, once we've set you up, a separate email from hnes@gemserve.com, which will include your application pack. That will include your AP1A form as well, so that's one of the things you need to update. So that will come to you as part of your application pack. So if you receive the email from HNES saying we've set you up on the system and you haven't got your email from the talansm.com domain, then like I say, please do check your junk and your spam filters first. And if you still haven't received it, then get in touch with us. The latest date to request being set up on the system for round 10 is Friday the 5th of September. So please do make sure you get your requests in ahead of that date. I'm going to hand over to Katie and she can talk you through the actual assessment process once you've submitted your application.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to run through the scoring criteria for capital applications first. So the main focus is deliverability and network performance improvement. With this, in the delivery section, we do want to have some cost certainty, so things like quotes provided, so you're sure you are sure like you do know how much it's going to cost, and also in terms of match funding as well, that you're able to deliver on that part. Then it goes on to delivery certainty, so it's good to provide program plans to show like how confident you are that you can spend the amount in that sort of time as well. So for that, we would people usually provide like a Gantt chart as well. So just to make sure that you are confident in being able to succeed for the when you requested the funding for. So if it was to be in 26-27, you'll be able to finish by March 27. Or if it's up to financial year 27-28, then again you'll be able to deliver and have everything finished by then. And then onto the network performance improvement. It's good to know like what you're improving. So from the baseline data that you provided before, as well as like the targets that you provided, it's good to see whether how you come about that, what you think is going to improve that, and where you've got that information. So we do need evidence to support those figures. Some of the parts are gas and electricity savings, reduction in unplanned outages and interruptions, reduce costs to the operator delivering heat to the end customer, quality of support and information, and heat loss, reducing heat losses. Sorry. On to the next slide, please. Again, the second bit on the capital applications is the project narrative. So we would like you to have a good explanation for the rationale to making sure it matches our objectives. So objective 1 and 2. And again, with the approach to disseminating information, this is one of the new questions in round 10, just to show evidence and like the methods used to get the information that you have, and methods used from previous funding, previous projects as well. Sorry. Then there's value for money. We do sort of want this as quantitative data to align with your savings. I would also recommend considering indirect savings as well. So if something is going to be affected and you'll get savings on top of the primary savings that you get in, it's good to make sure that you can state that in your narrative. Then there's the data availability and baselining. So it's good if you can put down all the data available from any metering that you have, as well as operational data availability and baseline and analysis. So where have you got it from? Is it estimated or is it from meters? Basically clarify how reliable it is. To the next one. So for revenue then, we still, you do need a good rationale to see how it fits with our objectives and why the optimization study will be needed and how it aligns with our objectives, as well as showing any evidence of methods used previously. So any previous studies used, what went well and what didn't, and what you can improve this time. In terms of the data availability and baselining, as I mentioned before, like we do understand that you might not have all the data available, which is also might be why you need the optimization study. So we do still ask you to try and input as much as you can, but we do take into consideration that you won't have all the data. I would also say in terms of which again we'd need like quotes and things like that for cost certainty, and we do want to make sure that you are able to have the study carried out, the final optimization report completed, and signed off and everything within the year, because we, you know, like Louise mentioned before, if funding has been requested for that year, it does need to be spent in that year. Okay, I'm just going to run through some of the timescales. So the initial 1 to 10 weeks is the assessment period. So we'll be sending out clarification questions to the applicants. I would say during, well, 22nd of September till the 28th of November, I would say please try and keep an eye out on any emails or clarification questions or notifications from the portal, because we don't want to cause like further delays. For example, if people are off or not everyone has access, that needs to be answering the questions and things like that. So try and keep that in mind when asking for access and being available. You then go on to weeks 11 to 13, which is a review of the assessments, but it's by the HNES Investment Committee. This could include further clarifications needed to be sent out to applicants, but again, it'll be mostly a review internally, leading to a decision of the funding awards. Because of the times in the year, there is a Christmas break, but it will be started. The assessment will continue in January. So we do then need internal approvals. So this will need to be done by the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero, and then in week 20, confirmation to all applicants of who is successful and unsuccessful. So that's looking like it would be in February. If there is any issues with the grant funding agreements to successful non-local authorities for applicants, that will come afterwards. And then we just need a further approval process for local authority applicants to issue the memorandum of understanding to successful applicants. So the GFAs will be sent first, and then the NAMOUs. Of course, like, these are just a guide at the moment, but they can change, so just keep that in mind. And then on to next slide. So clarifications, as I touched on earlier, we would say during the assessment period, clarifications may need to be raised and the applicant must respond. It can affect your assessment if you don't. So these are typically issued during the weeks 1, 3 and 5. So we do have time for them to be answered, to be reviewed, and then additional questions can be sent out. We do say, though, it is essential that the applicant is available during these weeks to ensure full timely responses to any clarifications, because we don't want any delays, as I mentioned before. And then further clarifications, again, might be raised as part of the investment committee process. So that's typically around week 12. Again, though, so any clarifications can be issued during weeks 1 to 16. So just keep that in mind. Keep your eye on like the calendars, especially if anyone's on any annual leave or breaks or something. There is like the correct backups in place if that does need to happen. And then on to the next slide, please. I am going to touch on the monitoring and reporting requirements. So this is only valid for people who receive funding. It's not to do with the assessment process. It's if you're successful, this is what you'll need to do. It allows us basically to make sure you're on track. And once you're successful as well, you will receive guidance about how to fill it out. So one of the conditions of the grant funding, this will be in the funding agreement, is to regularly submit monitoring and reporting returns. So this is monthly from the grant award, and so on the revenue side, it's monthly from the grant award until we've signed off the optimization study. This is to show, for example, like any risks, any issues, whether the study and site visits and stuff is on track, and when you're planning to draw down the funding. There is also the final report to be submitted, which is the optimization study outputs annex. Again, we will have some guidance on how to fill that out. On the capital side, again, it's from when the grant has been awarded until 2 years after the project has been completed, which is basically to see if the improvements have worked. So any of the measures, what the benefits are and the KPIs for each of those. It is monthly returns first. So we'll do, say for example, if we need to have a management M&R report from the July, you do have until the end of August to do it, so it's like a month behind. Just keep that in mind. And with the quarterly returns, it's monthly reporting, but every 3 months. So still have all that data provided, please, every month, but you only submit it every 3 months. That's once the project has been completed. Just thinking if there's anything I've missed. We do have a template if you do wish to have a little look as to, what the M&R report will look like. But again, if you are successful, we'll provide you some guidance on that. Thank you. Just to touch on grant claims now. So any non-local authorities, grant funding can only be claimed retrospectively. So you need to provide your grant claim form, which needs to align with the funding activities. So any of the measures or optimization studies, it needs to align with that. It also needs to have the correct organisation name on it and PO number, as well as the dates. This needs to be included alongside the invoices from any contractors, as well as remittance evidence. So you do need proof of spend, like proof of payment, alongside any invoices as well. Once this has been provided, we do review it, and then the payment will be made if everything is correct. And then if it's local authorities, the grant claim funding can be claimed up front in a lump sum once the MOU has been signed. But the funding is released on a per financial year basis, so it's not all of it. If you've got funding over 2 years, it's just what's in that financial year, and then whatever's in the next financial year following on. We do, though, before that, if it is across 2 years, we do need evidence of spend for the first year and remittance of that before we can then release funds for the second year. So just keep that in mind, that we still would need to upload the invoices and remittance after that financial year has been done. We do send out we normally have the grant claim forms that we'll send out to you. So that's it's like a template you fill out, and then you can submit everything alongside that. I think that's everything on that part. Now I'm going to pass it back over to Louise. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you, Katie. So just to finish up then, just to touch on pre-application support. So if we can go to the next slide. We do have a team of relationship managers who you are able to access if you have any questions about your application, about your project. If you have any questions about the application form, we can set up dedicated one-to-one sessions. Obviously, we can correspond by email as well. So if that is something you want to make use of, we have a separate email address called hnes.support@gemserve.com. So feel free to reach out on that email address and we can support you there. I mentioned at the start, we may also require some applicants to speak to a relationship manager. So rather than it being a kind of request from the applicant, we might require an applicant to speak to a relationship manager ahead of submission, just to make sure that we're comfortable that the project is sufficiently developed enough, that the supporting evidence is strong enough to make it worthwhile submitting an application and us doing the assessment. So just to give that kind of initial, and obviously it saves us time, but it saves you guys time as well, in terms of making sure that your project is eligible and you'll be able to provide the sufficient supporting evidence that we would need. So if that's the case, we'll reach out to the project contacts that we've received for the project and arrange a session on that. If you go to the next slide. So yeah, so if you have any general inquiries, hnes@gemserve.com is the email address to use. If you want to request access to the portal, if you want an application pack, that's the address. You've got the link to the guidance for applicants document in the chat. It's also on the slides here. We recommend that you sign up to our mailing list. So again, there's a link there. It takes you to our website. If you scroll about halfway down, there's a sign up to our mailing list section. That's where you can find out the latest information about what's going on with the scheme, when the funding rounds open, when we hold webinars like this. So yeah, it's worth being on that mailing list. And also just to say at the end, there are a number of optimization guides and optimization guidance videos on the gov.uk website. These provide helpful information on how to improve your network. So if you're really starting out on this journey, it's worth having a look over those as well. They give some really useful tips on things that you can do that maybe don't even need funding in terms of just improvements to maintenance and that kind of stuff. So it's worth having a look over those as well. So there's some links to that there. I think that's everything. So I'll open the floor to you guys as attendees. If there's any questions, if there's anything else you want to ask us that we've not covered, please do so now. You can either use the chat function or the Q&A function, or you can raise your hand if you want to come off mute and speak to us. So have we got any questions, Amy?
Yes, we've got a couple in the chat so far. So Charlie said, we have a heat network that serves several buildings across our large campus-style NHS hospital site. Are efficiency improvements to this network eligible for funding, and does this count as a communal or district network?
Yes, so we have funded NHS hospitals previously. If I would say it's a district heat network, if you've got multiple buildings on one site, communal communal networks are essentially one building with multiple customers in it. So for example, a block of flats, or if it was a non-domestic building, it might have multiple companies within it that all pay towards the energy bills. So, but for typically NHS hospitals tend to be districts because they are multiple buildings served by one energy centre. So, yes, we are able to accept applications from NHS trusts.
Charlie also asked, is there a risk of the capital funding being oversubscribed? If so, what are the criteria for selecting projects for funding?
So it is a popular scheme. We do get a lot of applications. We do state in the guidance that even if you meet all of our criteria, there is no guarantee of funding. If we do have a lot of applications, obviously there is a finite budget available. The scoring criteria, I think Katie talked through previously in terms of we look at the deliverability of the project, the value for money elements, the network performance improvements elements, how you align with our objectives. So each of those criteria gets a score. So we have our assessment team, Ramble. They will be assessing all the applications. They will score the projects based on the information provided and against our assessment criteria. Each project is then awarded a total score, and then the projects are ranked against all the other projects received or applications received in that round. And obviously the projects that score higher are more likely to be funded than those that score lower. So it is a competitive process. You are assessed against other projects in the round, and so it like I say, we do typically fund projects that meet our criteria, but we have previously also not funded if we feel that the budget isn't necessarily available. So I can't say that this round will be oversubscribed or not until we actually receive the applications through. We don't know. But yeah, there is a chance that you won't get funded, even if you do meet all of our criteria. But like I say, we've set out in this webinar the objectives of the scheme, the criteria that we assess against. So it's kind of for applicants to demonstrate as well as they can how well they align with our objectives, and also to provide us with sufficient information to have confidence that the project will deliver within the timescales requested and within the and we'll be able to draw down the funding within the financial years it's been allocated to. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
Eloise said, I'm applying on behalf of the NHS. Would they be classed as a non-local authority? This may present difficulty in forward funding.
Yes, they would be. Only local authority, only councils are classed as local authorities. Everyone else is a non-local authority. You will be required to pay for the measures up front and then claim the funding back retrospectively. As I've said before, we have funded NHS trusts in the past, and it's not been raised as a problem. So again, depending on the type of the NHS trust that you're applying for, and also the budgets they have and that kind of thing. Obviously, each organisation is different, but that is the approach that we need to follow. So if you want to speak to me separately about that, I'm happy to talk to you offline on that. But yeah, essentially they would be classed as non-local authorities.
And one more from Martin on HNES Objective 2, reducing customer detriment to improve consumer confidence. He said, as an NHS hospital, our consumers / customers are patients and our residents. So how does this affect supplies, buildings are all managed by the hospital and within other patients?
I don't know whether it was my my connection or your connection, Amy, but that was a bit broken up. So if it was just in case it was yours, I'll repeat the question. So it was with regards to Objective 2 with customer detriment as an NHS hospital, the customers are patients and not residents. So how does this affect our scoring as our district heat network supplies, buildings, all managed by the hospital and within other patients? So we do accept applications from non-domestic organisations, and like I say, we have funded NHS trusts in the past. The customer in need requirement is one element of the scoring criteria. You are not exempt from applying if you don't have customers in need. However, it is an element of the scoring. So you would not score as well as, for example, a social housing block of flats, for example, on that element. We therefore would want to see real evidence that the heat network is not performing well and that the measures will make improvements, so that you can kind of then address the other objective around reducing carbon emissions. So like I say, we have funded NHS trusts in the past. There are elements that you might not score as well on compared to other projects, but if the project is demonstrating a real need for improvement works, then it is possible to receive the funding as well.
Great. Paul asked, we are considering applying for our PFI hospital. Just to clarify, would the application need to come from the PFI organisation who own and operate the network rather than us as the NHS Trust who occupy the site? Essentially, we would be the beneficiary of the efficiencies made as it would be reducing our utility bills.
So again, I'll go back to the point I made around the applicant needs to be the legal entity who has the ability to make financial investments on the network. So the reason for that is, from a revenue perspective, we want to make sure that if recommendations in the optimization study are made, that the people that would then be looking to make those improvements and that investment are aware of the study and that they are bought into the concept of potentially making those improvements. What we don't want is to fund a study that then really just gets sat on a shelf and ignored. So we're keen to make sure that whoever it is that has the makes the financial decisions on the network to make those improvements is making that application. From a capital side, obviously we need match funding. So whoever it is that is providing that match funding to make those improvements, they obviously need to be providing the or submitting the application. Whoever it is who's receiving the funding to make those and is actually paying to make those improvements, that needs to be the applicant. So it's hard for us to say specifically. Again, Paul, I'm happy to have a chat with you offline about the specific case, but ultimately it's for the applicant to determine who that organisation is and whether or not that needs to be the, in this case, the PFI organisation or the NHS Trust. Again, similarly, another example is around managing agents and resident associations and things like that. It's whoever will be funding the measures and can make those investment decisions that needs to be the applicant.
Perfect, thanks Lou. One more question from Glyn. He said, would revenue funding for both round 10 and round 11 be granted at the same time, i.e. early in the financial year of 26-27? I'm trying to decide whether to rush an application for round 10 or wait until round 11.
They won't be granted at the same time. So round 10, you're likely to find out if you've been successful in February, March time. Round 11 doesn't close until February. So we would then have another period of 4 months or 4 to 5 months of assessment. So you'd find out in whether that is July, August time, whether you've been successful at the end of round 11. So no, you wouldn't find out at the same time.
Fab. I think that is all of the questions. So if there are no further questions, we'd like to say thank you everyone for coming. Hopefully you found the session useful. And as mentioned, we'll be sharing the slides with you. So thank you all for your time. If you'd like to follow our social pages, you can see both our LinkedIn and Twitter pages there. And you can also join our mailing list at hnes@gemserve.com.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Cheers,
Thank you. Bye-bye.